Hi there. Today we're going to explore the plot of the 2013 film, The Nun. The events take place in 1765. One night, Marquis de Croixmare arrives at the castle of Baron de Lasson. The Baron leaves a sleeping girl behind and goes to greet his guest. However, due to a severe illness, he only exchanges a few words with him before heading straight to his room. Meanwhile, the Marquis finds the memoirs of Suzanne Simonin on the table and starts reading them. Suzanne writes that her father married her mother at an older age, and they had 3 daughters. At the time of the events described, which happened 2 years ago, Armelle was 19, Lucy was 18, and Suzanne herself was 16. One day, while Suzanne was playing the harpsichord, a young man among the guests began turning her music sheets. The girl became flustered and lost track of the melody. The guests noticed the attraction between the two. After the incident, Suzanne's sister locked herself in her room. To her mother, Suzanne claimed that she was not interested in the young man. She said she loved only Christ. However, since she was too young for such love, Father Costello advised her to grow up and pray. Some time passed. Suzanne was living in a convent as a novice and began to realize that she wanted to return home. One day, Father Costello came to her and informed her that her parents had spent all their savings on dowries for the older daughters, leaving nothing for Suzanne. Therefore, she could not return home and would have to stay in the convent and take her vows. The Mother Superior tried to persuade Suzanne to stay for at least a year, assuring her that no one would force her to become a nun against her will. After some thought, Suzanne refused. However, after days of intense pressure from the abbess, the sisters, her mother, and family friends, she reluctantly agreed. The ceremony began. Along with the other novices, Suzanne vowed to speak the truth. When the priest asked her if she promised God chastity, faithfulness, and obedience, she said, no. Her parents took her home. The father scolded the mother for giving in once again. The next morning, Father Costello visited Suzanne. He said that it was improper for a grown woman to stay locked up at home, but it was the only option if she didn't want to return to the convent. Suzanne replied that she couldn't lie to God by saying she wanted to serve him. She asked why she was treated differently than her sisters, who were allowed to marry. Costello then revealed that her mother had given him permission to share the secret. Suzanne was not Monsieur Simonin's daughter. She was the result of her mother's affair. Although no one in the family knew this, her sisters would still deny her any chance of receiving a dowry. Lucy had already given birth, Armelle was pregnant, and they had no interest in their younger sister. Father Costello added that Suzanne had no idea what real poverty was. Later, her mother told her that her biological father was a wealthy man who was unaware of her existence. Everything Suzanne had received over the years rightfully belonged only to her sisters. Suzanne said she would sign a waiver to renounce her inheritance. But her mother noted that a child had no legal right to do so. To disinherit her, her father would need to learn the truth. Suzanne then begged her mother to marry her off to anyone, just so she wouldn't have to return to the convent. She asked where her real father was. The mother replied that she didn't know and then asked her daughter to help her atone for her only sin, the sin of Suzanne's birth. At this moment, the Marquis pauses his reading and goes upstairs to visit Baron de Lasson. The man is coughing incessantly and admits that he deliberately left the manuscript on the table so that his son would read it. The Marquis returns to reading. The narrative shifts back 2 years. Monsieur Simonin informs his daughter that rumors of her defiant act have spread among the convents, and now none of them are willing to accept her. However, a letter has just arrived from the abbess of the Convent of the Virgin Mary, who is willing to take her in. Abbess de Moni greets Suzanne and gives her a medallion that once belonged to her sister, asking her to wear it. In the corridor, a deranged nun named Sister Benedict, who is kept in the convent thanks to her wealthy parents, suddenly attacks Suzanne. The next day, Suzanne's hair is cut, and she is brought before the bishop to take her vows. She regains consciousness 2 days later in the infirmary and learns that she fainted during the ceremony. When a nun approaches her, Suzanne says she remembers nothing. The sister just smiles and replies that Suzanne is now one of them. Soon, Suzanne is visited by the new abbess, Sister Christine. Later, Suzanne discovers that the insane Sister Benedict pushed Abbess de Moni into a well. Returning to her cell, Suzanne finds a spiked vest and is outraged, stating that Mother de Moni had forbidden them. Sister Christine responds that under her orders, all the nuns must wear these vests at all times. Suzanne runs outside and throws the vest into the fire, declaring that Mother Demone was against such instruments of torture. For her defiance, Suzanne is punished. First, she is banned from eating in the dining hall with the other nuns. Then, she is forbidden from receiving confession or letters. The sisters stop speaking to her and soon begin to torment her. One day, Suzanne's friend Ursula tells her that there are rumors that Mother Demone jumped into the well herself. After hearing this, Suzanne faints. The doctor who examines her diagnoses her with exhaustion from malnutrition. That evening, Ursula feeds her friend some broth, and after regaining her strength, Suzanne steals a quill, ink, and paper during the night. She begins writing her memoirs and hides them under the floorboards in the morning. At that moment, Christine enters her cell. She says that one of the sisters saw Suzanne writing something and demands that she hand it over. Suzanne lies, saying she was writing a letter to her father but decided to throw it away. The abbess does not believe her and orders the sisters to search the cell and strip Suzanne of her clothes. The girl is forced to wear a shapeless robe and is led barefoot down a staircase covered in broken glass before being locked in a cold stone room. Sometime later she is brought to the abbess, who forces her to swear that she will never speak of what happened. Then she informs Suzanne that she has been chosen to sing in front of their guests on Good Friday. The next day, Suzanne gives Ursula her petition for leaving the convent and her memoirs, asking her to use her mother's connections, the Countess de Rib, to deliver them to a lawyer. Shortly after, a lawyer named Paul Manuri visits Suzanne. He informs her that her vows must be annulled personally by the Pope, so she will have to wait. But first, the bishop needs to speak with her. Immediately after, Suzanne is summoned by Christine. The abbess tries to pressure her, claiming that if she renounces her vows, she will disgrace the entire convent. Suzanne cries out that she never made any vows and wants to leave. She falls to her knees begging to be released. Christine responds by declaring that Suzanne is possessed by a demon and forbids her from praying. Suzanne is publicly stripped of her nun's habit and placed in a cold, barren cell with only a mattress on the floor. The next day, she is not allowed to attend prayer and is forced to lie on the floor so that all the nuns can step over her body. Afterwards, the abbess informs her that her mother has died. One day, Christine and the other sisters come for Suzanne. They tie her up and bring her before the bishop. The bishop orders them to untie her and asks why she hasn't been attending confession, receiving communion, or why she leaves her cell at night. Suzanne explains that she is not allowed to confess or receive communion. At night, she is denied water and is not given a chamber pot. She reveals that she is forbidden from praying, bathing, or changing her clothes, all because she does not feel called to be a nun. The bishop visits Suzanne's cell and is horrified by what he sees. He declares that he will write a petition to have Christine removed from her position. After the bishop's departure, Suzanne is allowed to return to normal life. One day, Paul Manuri visits again. He is surprised to learn that Suzanne never received the letter he sent a month ago and informs her that Rome has denied her request for annulment. However, Ursula's mother, Countess de Rib, managed to arrange Suzanne's transfer to another convent. Soon, Paul takes Suzanne to the new convent, where she meets the sisters and the new abbess. The abbess tells her that Christine was once her most troublesome pupil. The next morning, Suzanne is given new clothes, and after breakfast the abbess speaks with her, explaining that not every woman is happy in a forced marriage. After lunch, the abbess asks Suzanne to sing for the sisters. Following her performance, Sister Teresa expresses a desire to speak with the newcomer. The abbess forbids Teresa from doing so, and, left alone, begins to hum Suzanne's song. Later, Teresa warns Suzanne to avoid the abbess as much as possible. Suzanne responds that it doesn't matter. She has no intention of competing for attention. At that moment, the abbess approaches and rebukes Teresa, saying that years ago Sister Agatha behaved just as jealously, and she had to send her away. That evening, the abbess asks Suzanne to play the harpsichord. Standing beside her, the abbess gently strokes her hair. At that moment, Teresa bursts into the room and begs for forgiveness for her jealousy. Later, she confesses to Suzanne that when the abbess eventually tires of her, she will die of grief. The next day, after singing, Suzanne returns to her cell and finds expensive gifts that the abbess has prepared for her. She goes to the abbess and says it is unfair to the other sisters. In response, the abbess asks if Suzanne loves her. Suzanne replies that of course she does. After all, the abbess has been so kind to her. The abbess then asks her to prove it by giving her a kiss. Suzanne leans in and kisses her on the forehead. The abbess asks her to repeat it again and again. Meanwhile, Paul Manarin delivers Suzanne's memoirs to Baron de Lasson. That evening, the abbess speaks with Suzanne, asking if her heart is free and if she wants to learn the language of passion. Suzanne responds that she cannot speak about what she does not know. Later that night, the abbess sneaks into Suzanne's cell and begins to make advances toward her. However, hearing Teresa's footsteps in the corridor, she quickly leaves, vowing that Teresa will regret spying on her. The next morning, Teresa prays for Suzanne to die. The abbess tells Suzanne that she will lock up the crazy girl, as she refers to Teresa, in her cell. Suzanne begs her not to do this and prepares to go to confession. The abbess, visibly anxious, says that confession does not require admitting things that do not harm others. She adds that she can absolve all sins herself. During confession, Suzanne tells the priest what happened the previous night. The priest advises her that, if it happens again, she must reject the abbess. That evening, the abbess tells Suzanne that the priest has been ruining her life by turning her favorites against her. Suzanne replies that she promised during confession that she would not allow it to happen again. The next day, the abbess rushes toward Suzanne in the hallway, shouting that she cannot live without her. Overwhelmed, she collapses. Shortly after, the priest visits Suzanne and gives her a key to the back door, saying that at dawn, people sent by her benefactor will be waiting for her on the road. He also confesses that he was once forced to serve God, but unlike Suzanne, he did not find the strength to resist. At dawn, outside the convent, Suzanne meets Paul, who tells her that they have a long journey ahead. The next morning, Suzanne wakes up in the castle of Baron de Lasson. She goes downstairs and sees her memoirs on the table. Stepping outside, she encounters Marquis de Croixmare. When he asks if she managed to speak with Baron de Lasson before his death the previous night, Suzanne says she did. The Marquis then remarks that before passing away, his father desperately wanted to see his daughter. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, give it a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.